The Grand Theatre buzzed with anticipation as London's elite gathered for the annual Royal Variety Show. Outside, photographers lined the red carpet like soldiers awaiting battle, their cameras ready to capture every moment of royal glamour. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves mixed with expensive perfumes from the arriving guests. Adjusted her emerald green gown one final time as their car approached the theater entrance. The dress, a stunning creation by one of Britain's most celebrated designers, caught the light beautifully, its silk fabric flowing like water with each movement. She had chosen it carefully, knowing that every detail would be scrutinized by millions around the world. The color complemented her eyes perfectly, and the elegant cut spoke of timeless sophistication rather than fleeting fashion. William sat beside her, handsome in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his bow tie straight and his cufflinks gleaming. He reached over and gently squeezed her hand, a gesture so natural and loving that it spoke volumes about their relationship. After years of marriage, they had developed an unspoken language of support and encouragement that served them well during these high-profile appearances. "Ready for another evening of royal duties?" he asked with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling with the humor that had first attracted her to him years ago at university. Smiled back, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves mixed with excitement that always accompanied these grand occasions. "As ready as one can be to smile for 3 hours straight while pretending to understand every comedy routine," she replied, causing William to chuckle softly. The car slowed to a stop, and immediately the sounds from outside grew louder. Crowds of people had gathered behind barriers, their voices creating a symphony of excitement and anticipation. Many had waited for hours in the cold just to catch a glimpse of the royal couple, holding handmade signs and wearing clothes in patriotic colors. Their security detail exited first, followed by their private secretary who would guide them through the evening's protocol. Took a deep breath, transforming from the relaxed woman in the car to the poised royal figure the world expected to see. It was a transformation she had perfected over the years, though it still required conscious effort. William stepped out first, his movements confident and practiced. The crowd erupted in cheers, camera flashes creating a lightning storm of white light. He turned back to offer his hand too, a gesture both chivalrous and practical, as her long gown required careful navigation. As emerged from the car, the crowd's enthusiasm reached fever pitch. Her appearance was met with gasps of admiration and thunderous applause. The emerald gown caught every camera flash, creating a cascade of sparkles that made her appear almost ethereal. Her hair, styled in an elegant updo with a few strategic strands framing her face, showcased a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to William's grandmother. The royal couple began their walk down the red carpet, stopping every few feet to wave at the crowds and exchange brief words with officials. Smile was radiant and genuine, her years of royal training evident in the way she acknowledged different sections of the crowd, ensuring everyone felt included in the moment. Behind the barriers, 10-year-old Emma clutched her mother's hand tightly. She had convinced her family to wait outside the theater for over 2 hours, determined to see the princess she had admired since childhood. When eyes met hers across the crowd and the princess gave her a special wave, Emma felt as though she might burst with joy. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, inspiring dreams of grace and kindness. Meanwhile, professional photographer James Mitchell positioned himself strategically among his colleagues, his experienced eye capturing not just the obvious shots, but the subtle moments between the royal couple. He noticed how William's hand never strayed far from his back, ready to offer support if needed. He captured the genuine laughter that lit up his face when a small child in the crowd called out, "Princess Kate, you're beautiful," in a voice that carried over the general noise. Inside the theater, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The Royal Variety Show had been a beloved tradition for over a century, bringing together performers from every corner of the entertainment world. Tonight's lineup included established stars alongside fresh talent, each act carefully selected to represent the diversity and creativity of British entertainment. The show's producer, Henley, watched from the wings as final preparations were made. She had spent months planning this evening, knowing that the presence of William and would elevate the event to new heights of prestige and media attention. Every detail had been rehearsed multiple times, from the opening number to the final curtain call. As the royal couple made their way to their box seats, they were greeted by the theater's management and introduced to some of the evening's performers. Its warmth and genuine interest in each person they met was evident as she asked thoughtful questions about their work and upcoming projects. William, equally engaged, shared jokes and offered encouragement to the nervous younger performers. The theater itself was a sight to behold, its ornate Victorian architecture providing a fitting backdrop for the evening's grandeur. Red velvet seats rose in elegant tiers, while elaborate gilded moldings caught the light from the magnificent chandeliers. The royal box, decorated with fresh flowers and the finest fabrics, offered the perfect vantage point for the evening's entertainment. As they settled into their seats, couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come from her relatively ordinary upbringing in Berkshire. The girl who once dreamed of attending events like this was now one of its most anticipated guests. The weight of responsibility she carried was enormous, but so was the opportunity to use her position for good. The house lights began to dim, and a hush fell over the audience. William and exchanged a brief glance, both understanding that they were about to become part of something special. The evening would test their endurance, their ability to remain engaged and enthusiastic throughout a long performance, but it would also showcase the best of British talent and raise significant funds for charity. The curtain rose to reveal the opening act, a spectacular dance troupe whose precision and artistry immediately captivated the audience. Found herself genuinely moved by their performance, her appreciation for the arts evident in her focused attention and spontaneous applause. From her seat, she could see the faces of the audience members below, many of whom kept glancing up at the royal box with excitement and curiosity. She understood that her presence added an extra layer of significance to their evening out, and she took that responsibility seriously. As the first act concluded to thunderous applause, William leaned over to whisper something that made laugh softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. It was a moment of private connection in a very public space, a reminder that beneath the titles and protocol, they were simply a couple enjoying an evening out together. The show's host, a veteran comedian known for his quick wit and perfect timing, welcomed the audience and made the traditional acknowledgement of the royal presence. And William stood briefly to acknowledge the applause, their gracious response setting the tone for what promised to be an unforgettable evening. Little did anyone in that glittering audience know that this evening would become more than just another royal engagement. Hidden beneath the surface of glamour and protocol, personal dramas were about to unfold that would test the royal couple in ways they never expected, revealing truths about duty, sacrifice, and the price of living life in the public eye. The stage was set not just for an evening of entertainment, but for a series of events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their roles, their relationship, and themselves. As the second act began, the first threads of a story much more complex than anyone could imagine were already beginning to weave together in the shadows behind the spotlight. The second act brought a young singer named Sophie Collins to the stage, her voice pure and haunting as she performed a song about hope and resilience. Found herself deeply moved by the lyrics, which spoke of overcoming adversity and finding strength in unexpected places. Unknown to the audience, Sophie's story was particularly poignant. She had grown up in foster care and used music as her escape from a difficult childhood. During the intermission, and William were escorted backstage to meet some of the performers. It was here that the evening began to take an unexpected turn. As they approached Sophie's dressing room, they could hear muffled sobs coming from within. Maternal instincts immediately kicked in, and she gently knocked on the door. "Sophie, it's may we come in?" The door opened to reveal the young singer, her makeup streaked with tears. She had just received a phone call that her former foster mother, the only person who had ever truly believed in her talent, had suffered a heart attack and was in critical condition in a hospital hundreds of miles away. "I'm so sorry, Your Royal Highness," Sophie stammered, trying to compose herself. "I know this is unprofessional, but I just received terrible news about someone very important to me." His heart went out to the young woman immediately. She entered the small dressing room, followed by William, and sat down beside Sophie. "Please, don't apologize. What's happened?" As Sophie explained the situation through her tears, felt a deep connection to the girl's pain. She remembered her own losses, the grief that had shaped her understanding of life's fragility, and the importance of cherishing those we love. William, too, was moved by Sophie's obvious distress and the genuine love she felt for her foster mother. "Would it help if we arranged for you to get to the hospital tonight?" asked gently. "I'm sure we could organize transportation." Sophie looked up in amazement. You would do that? But I'm supposed to perform again in the second half. I can't just leave everyone down. William stepped forward, his voice kind but firm. Sophie, the most important thing right now is that you're with someone you love when they need you. The show will go on, but this moment with your foster mother might not come again. The theater's producer had been discreetly waiting outside and overheard the conversation. Initially concerned about the disruption to her carefully planned show, she found herself moved by the royal couple's immediate compassion and their willingness to prioritize human need over protocol. Within 30 minutes, arrangements had been made. A car was waiting to take Sophie to the airport, where a private flight would get her to the hospital in time. Had personally called ahead to ensure that hospital staff were expecting her and that she would have immediate access to her foster mother. As Sophie prepared to leave, she hugged tightly, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for caring about someone like me. Held her firmly, her own eyes moist with emotion. Someone like you? Sophie, you're exactly the kind of person who deserves all the support in the world. Your talent is extraordinary, but more importantly, your heart is beautiful. Go to her and don't worry about anything else. The rest of the evening continued, but the incident had affected both William and profoundly. As they watched the remaining acts, they found themselves thinking about the young singer racing through the night to be with the woman who had saved her life through love and belief. During another brief intermission, they were introduced to Wright, a middle-aged comedian whose act had brought the house down with laughter. But behind his jovial exterior was fighting his own battle. He had recently been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease, and tonight's performance might be one of his last. Had not planned to share his diagnosis with anyone, but something about the royal couple's genuine warmth and the events with Sophie had created an atmosphere of unusual openness backstage. As they chatted about his career and his comedy, he found himself revealing his secret. I wanted tonight to be perfect, he confided, his usual comedic timing replaced by quiet vulnerability. I've been performing for 25 years and I'm not ready for it to end, but my hands shake now and sometimes I forget my lines. The doctors say I have maybe 2 more years before it becomes too difficult to perform. And William listened with the kind of focused attention that made people feel truly heard. They didn't offer empty platitudes or false optimism, but instead acknowledged the real grief and fear that was experiencing. Have you thought about what you'd like to do with the time you have? William asked thoughtfully. I imagine your experience and perspective could help other people in similar situations. Had never considered this possibility. He had been so focused on what he was losing that he hadn't thought about what he might still be able to give. The conversation planted a seed that would eventually grow into a foundation to support other entertainers facing career-ending health challenges. Meanwhile, in the hospital hundreds of miles away, Sophie sat holding her foster mother's hand. Mrs. Davies was conscious and stable, and her face lit up when she saw the young woman she had raised with such love and dedication. I heard you performed for royalty tonight, whispered weakly. I'm so proud of you. Sophie squeezed her hand gently. The princess and prince helped me get here. They understood how important you are to me. They said that love and family come before everything else. Smiled, tears flowing freely. She had spent 30 years fostering children, most of whom had moved on to build their own lives. Sophie was the one who had stayed connected, who had never forgotten the woman who had seen potential in a broken, angry 12-year-old girl. Back at the theater, the final act was a group of young dancers from a school in one of London's most disadvantaged neighborhoods. Their performance was energetic and inspiring, but noticed that one of the dancers, a boy of about 14, seemed to be favoring his left leg. After the show, as they met with the dance group, gently asked the boy, Tommy, about his leg. He reluctantly admitted that he had injured it during rehearsal, but had been too afraid to say anything because he didn't want to miss the chance to perform at the royal variety show. Dancing is everything to me, he explained, his eyes bright with passion despite the obvious pain he was in. My dad thinks it's not a real job for a boy, but my teacher says I have real talent. This was my chance to prove that I belong here. Knelt down to Tommy's level, ignoring the expensive gown that pooled around her on the theater floor. Tommy, talent like yours doesn't need to be proven in one night. But if you damage your leg permanently, you might never dance again. Real strength sometimes means knowing when to rest and heal. William called for medical attention, and it was discovered that Tommy had a stress fracture that could have become much worse if he had continued to perform without treatment. The royal couple arranged for him to see the best sports medicine specialist in London and ensured that his dance education would continue with a full scholarship to a prestigious performing arts school. As the evening finally wound down, and William found themselves changed by the experiences they had shared. The glamorous event they had attended had become something much more meaningful, a series of human connections that had touched their hearts and reminded them why their royal duties mattered. In their car on the way home, they sat in comfortable silence, each processing the emotions of the evening. Thought about Sophie, probably still sitting by his bedside, and about facing an uncertain future with new hope. She thought about young Tommy, whose dreams were now supported by people who believed in him. "Evenings like this remind me why we do what we do," she said softly to William. He nodded, taking her hand in his. "It's easy to get caught up in the protocol and the schedule, but tonight was about real people with real struggles and real dreams. That's what makes it all worthwhile." As their car pulled through the gates of their residence, noticed a message on her phone. It was from Sophie. "Is stable and improving. The doctors are optimistic. Thank you for helping me get here in time. I will never forget your kindness. You truly are a princess in every sense of the word." Showed the message to William, and they both smiled. They had no idea that their actions that evening would soon create a ripple effect that would touch countless more lives, or that the challenges they were about to face would test their own relationship in ways they had never anticipated. The seeds of change had been planted during what should have been a routine royal engagement. Now, those seeds would begin to grow into something that would transform not only the lives of the people they had met, but their own understanding of what it truly meant to serve others with their positions of privilege and influence. 3 weeks after the royal variety show, the ripple effects of that transformative evening were beginning to manifest in ways and William had never anticipated. The media coverage of the event had initially focused on stunning gown and the couple's obvious chemistry, but soon stories began emerging about their behind-the-scenes interactions with the performers. Sophie Collins had returned to London after spending a week with her recovering foster mother, and her experience had inspired her to write a new song about unexpected kindness. When she performed it on a popular morning television show, she spoke openly about how the royal couple had helped her in her moment of crisis. The song, titled "Royal Hearts," became an overnight sensation, not for its connection to royalty, but for its message about the power of compassion from unexpected sources. The success of Sophie's song brought attention to the broader issue of young people aging out of the foster care system without adequate support. Who had always been passionate about children's welfare, found herself deeply moved by the stories that began reaching her office. Letters arrived daily from former foster children, social workers, and families sharing their experiences. One letter particularly touched her heart. It came from a 17-year-old girl named, who was about to age out of foster care with nowhere to go. She had heard Sophie's story and wondered if there might be programs to help young people like her transition to independent adulthood successfully. "I don't expect a princess to solve my problems," had written in her careful handwriting. "But Sophie's story gave me hope that someone important might actually care about kids like us. Maybe if enough people knew how hard it is, something could change." Read the letter 3 times, each reading strengthening her resolve to use her platform more effectively. She called a meeting with her staff to discuss the possibility of developing a new charitable initiative focused on supporting young people transitioning out of foster care. Meanwhile, Wright's story had also gained public attention, though not through any seeking of publicity on his part. A fellow comedian had shared situation during a charity event, and soon the entertainment community was rallying around the idea of creating a support network for performers facing career-ending health challenges. Found himself inundated with calls from agents, fellow comedians, and production companies wanting to support his idea of a foundation. What had begun as a moment of vulnerability shared with the royal couple was evolving into a movement that could help hundreds of entertainers facing similar challenges. William, inspired by his conversation with, began exploring how the royal family's existing patronages might better support people dealing with health challenges that affected their ability to work. He arranged meetings with disability rights advocates and healthcare professionals to better understand the broader issues at play. Young Tommy, the dancer with the stress fracture, was recovering well under the care of the specialist the royal couple had arranged. But his story had highlighted the financial pressures facing talented young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who needed medical care to pursue their dreams. Decided to visit Tommy at his dance school, arriving without fanfare on a Thursday morning. She found him in physical therapy, working carefully to rebuild the strength in his leg while maintaining his flexibility. His dedication was evident, but so was his anxiety about missing training time and falling behind his peers. "Your Royal Highness," Tommy's dance teacher, Mrs., was clearly surprised by the unannounced visit. "We weren't expecting you." "I wanted to see how Tommy was progressing," explained simply, "and I was hoping to observe some of your classes if that would be all right." As watched the young dancers work, she was struck by their talent and dedication, but also by the obvious financial strain many of their families faced. Some students wore worn dance shoes, and others had to share equipment. The school itself was clearly operating on a tight budget, with aging facilities and overworked teachers doing their best with limited resources. During a break, she sat with Tommy and several other students, asking about their dreams and the challenges they faced. Their honesty was refreshing and heartbreaking. Many spoke of family members who worked multiple jobs to afford dance lessons, of choosing between new shoes and dance fees, of talented friends who had to quit because their families couldn't manage the costs. "Dancing feels like flying," explained Sarah, a 15-year-old with extraordinary grace. "But sometimes I feel guilty because I know how much my mom sacrifices for my lessons. She works nights cleaning offices so I can be here during the day." Felt a familiar stirring in her heart, the same feeling she had experienced when reading Letter. These young people weren't asking for handouts. They were asking for opportunities to develop their gifts and contribute to the world through their art. That evening, shared her experiences with William over dinner in their private residence. They ate simply, away from the formal dining rooms, surrounded by family photos and the comfortable chaos of their children's belongings scattered about. "I keep thinking about what we witnessed at the theater," said, picking at her salad thoughtfully. "It wasn't just one evening of entertainment. It was a window into the struggles that so many people face every day." William nodded, understanding completely. "I've been having similar thoughts about and the other performers we've met since then. There's something about the entertainment industry that makes people feel they have to suffer in silence when things go wrong." They discussed the letters and calls they had been receiving, the stories of struggle and resilience that were flooding their offices. Both felt a growing sense of responsibility to respond in a meaningful way, but they also understood the complexities of their position. "We can't solve everyone's problems," William said carefully, "but maybe we can use our influence to highlight issues that aren't getting enough attention." Agreed, but she was also wrestling with a deeper question. She had entered royal life understanding that it would involve charity work and public service, but she was beginning to realize that truly effective advocacy required more than just showing up at events and giving speeches. The next morning brought news that would test their growing commitment to meaningful change. Davies, Sophie's beloved foster mother, had suffered another heart attack. This one was more serious, and the prognosis was uncertain. Sophie called office directly, something she never would have done before their connection at the theater. She was beside herself with worry and felt completely alone in making decisions about care. "She doesn't have any other family," Sophie explained through tears when called her back. "I'm the closest thing she has to a daughter, but I'm not legally anything to her. The doctors want to talk to family members about treatment options, but I don't have any legal standing." Immediately understood the problem. Had spent decades caring for other people's children, but she had never legally adopted any of them. Now, when she needed someone to advocate for her, the system didn't recognize the relationships she had built. "Sophie, I'm going to connect you with some legal experts who specialize in exactly this kind of situation," promised. "And William and I will visit if she's well enough to receive visitors. She shouldn't face this alone." The visit to the hospital was unlike any royal engagement had ever undertaken. There were no photographers, no formal protocols, no prepared speeches. Just a woman visiting another woman who had dedicated her life to caring for children who needed love. Was weak but alert, her eyes brightening when she saw and William enter her room. Sophie sat beside the bed, holding the older woman's hand with obvious devotion. "I never thought I'd meet royalty in a hospital gown," joked weakly, her sense of humor intact despite her condition. Laughed softly, pulling a chair close to the bed. "I think you look perfectly dignified. Sophie has told us so much about you and all the children you've cared for over the years." As they talked, learned that had fostered over 60 children during her career. Some had stayed only briefly, others for years. Some had struggled with serious behavioral problems, others had been dealing with trauma and loss. Had approached each child with the same patient love, believing that every young person deserved someone who believed in their potential. "The hardest part," admitted, "is when they age out of the system and you lose touch. You spend years loving them, helping them heal, and then they're adults and they move on. That's how it should be, but sometimes you wonder if you made any difference at all." Sophie squeezed her hand. "You changed my life completely. I was angry and broken when I came to you, and you never gave up on me. Look where I am now because you believed I could be more than my circumstances." The conversation continued for over an hour, touching on everything from early days as a foster mother to her worries about the current state of the child welfare system. Found herself taking mental notes, understanding that experience represented decades of insights into how the system worked and where it was failing children. William was equally engaged, asking thoughtful questions about the support foster families received and the challenges they faced. Answers painted a picture of dedicated people working within an underfunded, overburdened system that too often failed the children it was meant to protect. As they prepared to leave, reached for his hand. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Not because you're a princess, but because you listened like someone who truly cares. Sophie told me how you helped her get to me that first night, and I want you to know that kindness meant everything to both of us." Driving back from the hospital, and William rode in contemplative silence. The day had reinforced their growing understanding that their positions gave them access to stories and perspectives that could inform policy and public opinion in meaningful ways. "We need to do more than just write checks to charity," said finally. "We need to understand the real issues and use our voices to advocate for change." William agreed, but he also understood the delicate balance they had to maintain. "We have to be careful not to overstep our constitutional role, but within those boundaries, we can certainly shine a light on important issues." That evening, received a call that would change everything. The 17-year-old who had written to her about aging out of foster care had been found unconscious in her foster home. She was alive, but the incident had revealed that she had been struggling with depression and feelings of hopelessness about her future. As hung up the phone, she realized that the time for gradual change had passed. The lives they were touching were too precious and too precarious to approach this work anything less than their full commitment and creativity. The stage was being set for a confrontation between protocol and passion, between tradition and innovation, between playing it safe and taking the risks necessary to create meaningful change. The news about hit like a physical blow. She found herself packing their private sitting room at midnight, unable to sleep while a 17-year-old girl lay in a hospital bed, feeling so hopeless about her future that she had considered ending her life. William watched his wife wrestle with emotions he recognized, but had rarely seen so intensely. "I keep thinking about our own children," said, her voice thick with emotion. "They'll never know what it's like to feel completely alone in the world, to have no safety net, no family to fall back on. How is it acceptable that children like face adulthood with nothing but uncertainty and fear?" William understood her anguish, but he also knew the limitations of their position. "We can't save every child. We can't solve every problem, no matter how much we want to." Turned to face him, her eyes blazing with determination. "But we can save some of them, can't we? We can use our influence to create programs that actually work, that give these young people real support as they transition to independence." The next morning, made a decision that would put her at odds with palace protocol and traditional royal discretion. She called a meeting with her private secretary, her communications team, and several advisors to discuss launching an unprecedented initiative focused on aging out foster youth. "I want to create a comprehensive support program," she announced, her usual diplomatic language replaced by direct, passionate advocacy. "Not just a charity that writes grants, but an actual system that provides housing, education support, job training, mental health services, and mentoring for young people leaving foster care." Her private secretary, Charles, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Your Royal Highness, such an initiative would be quite different from traditional royal patronages. It would require significant fundraising, political navigation, and ongoing management. There are also questions about whether such direct involvement in social policy would be appropriate for your position. Had anticipated this resistance. Charles, I've spent years attending charity galas and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. I've given countless speeches about the importance of supporting vulnerable children. But what if all that activity isn't actually changing anything? What if we're just maintaining the status while feeling good about ourselves? The room fell silent. His team had never heard her speak so bluntly about the limitations of traditional royal charity work. She was essentially questioning the entire framework within which she had operated since joining the royal family. I'm not suggesting we abandon our existing commitments, she continued, her voice softening slightly. But I am saying that I want to do something that actually moves the needle, something that creates measurable change in young people's lives. William, who had been quietly observing the meeting, spoke up. What kind of timeline are you thinking about, and what would it look like practically? Had clearly given this considerable thought. I want to start with a pilot program in London, working with existing foster care agencies and housing organizations. We'd provide transitional housing for 20 young people aging out of care, along with comprehensive support services. If it works, we expand it. Her communications director, Sarah Fletcher, looked concerned. Your Royal Highness, this kind of hands-on social program would attract significant scrutiny. Every aspect would be examined by the media and critics. If anything went wrong with any of the young people in the program, you could face intense criticism. Nodded, understanding the risks. Sarah, a 17-year-old girl, nearly died because she felt she had no future. If trying to prevent that from happening to other young people means facing criticism, then I'll face criticism. Over the following weeks, threw herself into research and planning with an intensity that surprised even William. She met with social workers, former foster youth, housing experts, education specialists, and mental health professionals. She visited existing transitional housing programs, both successful ones and those that were struggling. During one particularly eye-opening visit to a facility in East London, met James, a 19-year-old who had aged out of care 6 months earlier. He was working 2 part-time jobs while trying to attend college, living in a tiny bedsit that cost most of his income, and struggling to manage basic life skills that most people learned from their families. No one ever taught me how to budget money, or how to deal with landlords, or what to do when I get sick, James explained matter-of-factly. You just turn 18 and suddenly you're supposed to know how to be an adult, but you've never had adults in your life who weren't paid to be there. Found herself asking question after question, trying to understand the specific gaps in support that left young people like James vulnerable. His landlord was trying to evict him for being 3 days late with rent, despite James having the money and a reasonable explanation for the delay. He had missed college classes because he couldn't afford transport when his hours were cut at one job. He had gone without meals to afford textbooks. The thing is, James said with remarkable maturity, I'm actually one of the lucky ones. I'm managing to stay in school and keep a roof over my head. A lot of my friends from care aren't doing as well. As delved deeper into the research, she discovered that the statistics on outcomes for youth aging out of foster care were even worse than she had imagined. High rates of homelessness, unemployment, mental health challenges, and involvement with the criminal justice system painted a picture of systemic failure that was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Meanwhile, the media had begun to notice increased focus on foster care issues. Initially, the coverage was positive, praising her for taking on an important cause. But as it became clear that she was developing something more substantial than traditional royal charity work, questions began to arise about the appropriateness of such direct involvement. A particularly critical editorial in a major newspaper questioned whether it was overstepping the bounds of her constitutional role. While the Duchess's concern for vulnerable young people is admirable, the piece read, her apparent intention to create and manage social programs represents a departure from the traditional royal approach of supporting existing charities rather than competing with them. The criticism stung, but it also strengthens resolve. She realized that challenging the traditional approach would inevitably attract resistance from those who preferred the status. What surprised her was how much she found herself caring more about the young people she had met than about maintaining her previously unblemished public image. William found himself in the delicate position of supporting his wife while also managing concerns from other family members and palace officials. During a particularly tense family dinner, several relatives expressed worry about the potential political implications of this initiative. The monarchy's strength lies in our ability to remain above political controversies, one family member argued. This program, however well-intentioned, could be seen as implicit criticism of government social policy. William defended his wife's work, but privately he wondered if they were taking on more than they could handle. The evening's conversation had made clear that this passion project was creating ripples of concern throughout the royal establishment. That night, as they prepared for bed, and William had their most honest conversation yet about the challenges they were facing. "Are you having second thoughts?" asked, her voice quiet but steady. William considered the question carefully. "I'm worried about you," he said finally. "You're putting yourself in a position where you'll be criticized no matter what you do. If the program succeeds, people will say you're showing up the government. If it struggles, they'll say you were naive to think you could solve complex social problems." Nodded, understanding his concerns. "I know the risks, but William, I can't unknow what I know now. I can't pretend that attending charity galas is enough when I've met young people who are literally falling through the cracks in our society." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from his private secretary. The 17-year-old whose crisis had sparked urgency was being released from the hospital the next day. Her foster placement had broken down, and social services was struggling to find appropriate housing for her. Without hesitation, made another decision that would raise eyebrows throughout the royal establishment. "I'm going to personally ensure that has somewhere safe to stay and the support she needs," she told William. "I don't care what the protocol says about appropriate boundaries." William saw the determination in his wife's eyes and realized that there was no going back. Had crossed a line from dutiful charity patron to passionate advocate, and she was prepared to face whatever consequences that transformation might bring. The next morning called directly, something that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "I know you're being released from the hospital today, and I want you to know that you're not alone. We're going to make sure you have somewhere safe to stay and people who believe in your future." Who had spent most of her 17 years believing that no one in positions of power really cared about young people like her, broke down in tears at the kindness in the royal voice on the other end of the line. As made arrangements for some immediate needs, she realized that she had committed herself to a path that would require her to redefine what it meant to be royal in the modern world. The comfortable distance between privilege and social reality was disappearing, replaced by a much more complex and demanding relationship with the people she served. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test not only its resolve, but the entire royal family's ability to adapt to changing expectations about how public figures could and should use their influence for social change. 6 months after the royal variety show, stood in the living room of the first transitional housing facility of what had become known as the Foundation. The space was warm and inviting, decorated with artwork created by the young residents and filled with the sounds of normal life, someone practicing piano, a television playing in the background, the gentle hum of conversation from the kitchen. Approached her with a confidence that would have seemed impossible during their first phone conversation. The 17-year-old who had once felt hopeless about her future was now 18, enrolled in college, working part-time at a local community center, and serving as a peer mentor for other young people transitioning out of foster care. "Your Royal Highness," said with a smile, "I wanted to show you my acceptance letter." Took the letter with hands that trembled slightly with emotion. It was from the university where would begin studying social work in the fall, with a full scholarship that had been arranged through one of the Foundation's education partnerships. "I'm so proud of you," said, meaning every word. "You've worked incredibly hard for this." "I couldn't have done it without this place," replied, gesturing around the facility. "Not just the housing, but having people who believed I could succeed even when I didn't believe it myself." The Foundation had grown from its initial vision into something that surprised even her with its scope and impact. The pilot program had been so successful that they had opened 2 additional facilities, and inquiries were coming in from organizations around the world wanting to replicate their model. But the success hadn't come without challenges that had tested in ways she had never anticipated. The criticism from traditionalists within the royal establishment had intensified as the foundation's profile grew. Some accused her of inappropriate political involvement. Others questioned whether royal resources should be directed toward such hands-on social programming. The most difficult criticism had come from within her own family. During a particularly tense conversation with senior royals, had been told bluntly that her work was creating constitutional complications and that she needed to remember her place. "My place," had responded with quiet dignity, "is wherever I can use the privilege I've been given to make a meaningful difference in people's lives." The conversation had ended in uncomfortable silence, but's resolve had only strengthened. She had spent too much time with young people like James and the others to retreat into the safer territory of traditional royal duties. William had stood by her throughout the controversy, though she knew it had cost him relationships and created tensions he was still navigating. Their marriage had deepened through the challenges, their shared commitment to the foundation's work creating a new dimension to their partnership. As toured the facility, she stopped to check in with the comedian from the royal variety show who had become an unexpected ally in their work. His Parkinson's diagnosis had progressed, but he had found new purpose in using his experience to help other entertainers facing career-ending health challenges. "How are you feeling today?" asked, noticing the slight tremor in his hands that had become more pronounced over the months. "Good days and bad days," replied honestly. "But having something meaningful to do with the time I have left makes all the difference. The support group we started has 12 members now, and 3 of them have found new ways to use their skills in the entertainment industry despite their health challenges." Had become an integral part of the foundation's work, helping to develop programs that address the unique needs of creative professionals facing various life transitions. His warmth and humor had made him a beloved figure among the young residents, who appreciated his ability to find laughter even in difficult circumstances. Sophie Collins arrived as was finishing her tour. The young singer had become one of the foundation's most effective advocates, using her platform to raise awareness about the challenges facing youth aging out of foster care. Her song, Royal Hearts, had evolved into an entire album about resilience, hope, and the power of unexpected connections. "Wanted me to give you this," Sophie said, handing a handwritten letter. Davies had recovered from her heart attacks, and inspired by the foundation's work, had become a volunteer mentor for young people navigating the transition to independence. Her decades of experience as a foster mother had proved invaluable in helping the program understand the complex emotional needs of young adults who had grown up in care. Opened the letter carefully, recognizing neat handwriting. "Dear, I wanted to tell you that in 30 years of fostering children, I never imagined that one evening at a theater would lead to something like this. The young people in your program remind me why I started fostering in the first place, because every child deserves someone who believes in their potential. You have created something beautiful and necessary. Thank you for showing that royalty can be about service in the truest sense, with love and admiration." Felt tears prick her eyes as she finished reading. The letter captured perfectly what the foundation had come to represent, not just housing and support services, but the radical idea that every young person deserved to have someone believe in their future. Tommy, the dancer whose injury had revealed the financial pressures facing talented young people, bounded over to greet. His leg had healed completely, and he was now attending the prestigious performing arts school on the scholarship she had arranged. But more importantly, he had become an advocate for other young dancers facing similar challenges. "Your Royal Highness, I wanted to tell you about the emergency fund we've set up for dancers who need medical treatment," Tommy said excitedly. 3 kids have already been able to get the care they needed without having to choose between their health and their training. The fund, started with a modest donation from the royal couple's personal accounts, had grown through contributions from the dance community and other supporters. It was one of several specialized programs that had emerged as the foundation identified specific needs within different communities. As the afternoon progressed, found herself in the facility's common room, surrounded by young people who just months earlier had been facing uncertain futures. James, whom she had met during her research phase, was now a peer counselor while finishing his degree. Sarah, the dancer who had worried about her mother's sacrifices, was teaching dance to younger children while pursuing her own performance career. I keep thinking about what my life would have looked like if this place hadn't existed, James said thoughtfully. I probably would have dropped out of university. I definitely would have struggled with housing. I might have given up on my goals entirely. Listened as several young people shared similar reflections, understanding that the foundation's impact extended far beyond providing temporary housing. It had created a community where young people could support each other, learn life skills in a supportive environment, and maintain connections with caring adults as they built their independent lives. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of children who had come to visit the foundation as part of their own education about service and social responsibility. Watching her young family interact naturally with the residents felt a deep satisfaction about the values she was modeling for them. Her eldest child approached one of the residents and asked, "What's it like to live here?" with the genuine curiosity that children bring to new situations. "It's like having a really big family," the young person replied. "Everyone looks out for each other, and the adults here care about us without being paid to care about us." As the day wound down, found herself in conversation with Dr. Maria Santos, the social worker who had been instrumental in developing the Foundation's programming model. Dr. Santos had initially been skeptical about a royal initiative in social services, but had become one of its most trusted advisors. "When you first approached me about this project, I thought it would be another well-meaning but ultimately superficial royal charity," Dr. Santos admitted. "I've never been happier to be wrong about something." "What made the difference?" asked, genuinely curious about the professional perspective on their work. "You listened," Dr. Santos replied simply. "You didn't come in with predetermined ideas about what these young people needed. You learned from them, from the research, from people who had been doing this work for years. And when the program needed to evolve, you were willing to change course." Nodded, thinking about how much her approach to royal duties had evolved since that evening at the theater. The traditional model of royal charity work appearing at events, giving speeches, writing checks had been replaced by something much more demanding but infinitely more rewarding. As she prepared to leave, was approached by a young woman she hadn't met before. The girl introduced herself nervously as a 19-year-old who had just been accepted into the program. "I wanted to thank you," said quietly. "Not just for this place, but for showing people like me that someone important enough to be a princess thinks we're worth helping." Felt the familiar tightening in her throat that came with these moments of connection. You are worth helping. You're worth believing in. This program exists because young people like you deserve every opportunity to build the life you want. As Carr pulled away from the facility, she reflected on how much had changed since that evening at the Royal Variety Show. What had started as a routine royal engagement had become a catalyst for personal transformation and meaningful social change. The foundation was now operating 3 facilities, had helped dozens of young people transition successfully to independence, and had become a model being studied by governments and organizations internationally. More importantly, it had changed the conversation about what royal service could look like in the modern world. The criticism hadn't stopped. If anything, success had intensified opposition from those who preferred traditional approaches to royal charity. But she had learned to measure success not by approval ratings or media coverage, but by young people like James, Tommy, and who were building lives they had once thought impossible. As her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie sharing news of another young person the foundation had helped connect with educational opportunities, smiled. The ripples from that evening at the theater continued to spread, touching lives in ways she was still discovering. William squeezed her hand as their car traveled through London. "Any regrets?" he asked, referring to the path they had chosen and the challenges it had brought. Thought about acceptance letter, about's words of gratitude, about the community of young people who were supporting each other through one of life's most difficult transitions. She thought about the criticism, the protocol battles, the family tensions, and the constant scrutiny of their every decision. "Not one," she said firmly. "This is what our positions are for. This is what privilege should be used for. I wouldn't change anything." As they headed home to their own children, felt a deep sense of purpose that had been missing from her life before that transformative evening at the theater. She had discovered that true royal service wasn't about maintaining traditions or looking dignified in photographs. It was about using whatever advantages you had been given to lift up people who needed support. The foundation would continue to grow and evolve, touching more lives and inspiring other initiatives. The young people they had helped would go on to help others, creating an ever-expanding network of support and opportunity, and would continue to navigate the delicate balance between royal duty and social advocacy, secure in the knowledge that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The glamorous evening at the royal variety show that had started this journey felt like a lifetime ago, but its lessons remained fresh. That behind every public appearance was the potential for real human connection, that privilege carried the responsibility to serve, and that sometimes the most important work happened not on the grand stages of royal life, but in the quiet moments when compassion was allowed to flourish into action.